welcome Matt McConnell. I am so happy that we're here just to kind of chat today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah. I'm excited because I've kind of watched you from afar. I've never really worked in your organization. Well, I've worked with you within an organization, but I've just admired your leadership from afar. So I'm really interested to see what insights and wisdom you're going to give us today. And I want to start out by you have a great resume that people can read on LinkedIn about your accomplishments. And I would rather hear from your voice. What was that journey like for you? And what maybe are those things that you pull out of that time period about what made you the leader you are today?
Yeah, it's funny in retrospect, and I've been doing a bit of introspection of late of how the hell did I get here and where the hell am I, right? Like we all do that kind of that thought at the end of the year, and you're like, what's coming next year? One thing that people generally think is there's some logical progression to your career that you can map. I am the example of the absolute opposite of that thinking. I equate it to more of a leaf in a river. Like the river is going to take you. You put yourself out there, and you're going to go different places than you might have thought. But everything does kind of have a common theme. Um, my background's been a range of big companies, two startups, doing a big company, a startup in a big company. The work we did at Comcast was really what I would call more of an entrepreneur. We built a business within, a large, Comcast operator. I've done some board work. I do teach at the University of Denver. I've done a lot of different things, and I think each one of them has had an impact on the next one, and each one of those has built upon things that I like more than others. It's skills that I'd like to develop, like people skills, culture matters, leadership comes out of that. You get comfortable with kind of where you can play, and you find other great people to play where you can't. So I would think my career's started normal, college, consulting, business school consulting, and then it kind of took a little bit of a wayward path into America Online. I'm sure I sent you a disc, everyone else in this country a disc, at some point in the early 2000s. Then to a large company, then to a startup called Tropis that we kind of created off the ground. We sold that to EchoStar, which was part of Dish Networks. I went to Comcast, was kind of the last big stint. Big corporation, but we built a business within the business. Then did some smaller things. A public company, I was a COO, and this PE-backed company, I was a CEO. I sit on boards and talk to management teams. So I've kind of seen it from all angles, which has been kind of fun.
Yeah, I had to laugh when you said the whole name because I'm like, AKA AOL. Like, does anybody really know the full name? I don't know.
They
If
should. It was the internet back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, America Online. I had to really think about that. So that's interesting. I love the leaf analogy, and it made me think about times where you get stuck on a rock and you kind of dry up, and sometimes where you go underneath. Like that's such a great visualization of it. When did you first realize that you had leadership chops, or when did you go, "Oh, I'm kind of good at this"?
Um, it's funny. You built confidence along the way in different uh, events, kind of make you stand up and be counted, or stand up and get knocked over. So I've had my share of standing in the front of the line and taking the bullets, and I've had my share of watching other people kind of avoid the bullets. I always think of the Matrix where the guy like slides and bullets just kind of skim past. There's an art and a skill to how you manage that. I took a few bullets, in bad places along the way that you kind of learn from, and I think that's to the essence of your question of you have to be open minded to accept the failures that come along naturally to then build upon them. If you're going to dwell on them, and using the leaf analogy, if I'm stuck in an eddy and I'm just spinning, um, shame on me. I should take the defeats, grow thick skin, and I think over my career, you start to just say, look, I'm trying to do the right things, and look, I'm not going to make everyone happy. I'm not always going to be right, um, and that's just life. And when I'm wrong, that's fine too. The world keeps spinning, and so I think you learn kind of in each of your experiences how to grow, or hopefully you're learning how to learn. Maybe that's another way to
Mhm.
say it. And defeat is the birth of growth in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Um, I didn't know electric outlets were bad until I stuck my finger in one. Right, like that's how you learn, or you should learn. Kids today don't learn that way, but those are kind of the building blocks, I think, of a career or a life.
Yeah. Yeah, and those bullets that you talked about, I feel like that has the feeling of corporate politics. And so I'm curious to get your lens on corporate politics and how that might have shaped you or taught you something.
Yeah, anytime there's more than one person in a room, you're going to have some sort of politics. You have different desire, different ambition, different kind of view of the world. And I think it's recognizing that and staying true to what it is that you're trying to solve for. I've met some great people along the way, and I've met some people that just aren't good people, and that's life. You'd like to think everyone's motives are the same, and we're all trying to do for the common good, for the good of the company or
Yeah.
the good of the team. Um, that's not always the case. And so you keep seeking out those that think like you and believe the things that you believe. And sometimes that'll take you to the point of saying, I'm not staying here anymore. I don't believe what you believe, and I want to go and be around people that are authentic and transparent and you can trust. And those were kind of the ebbs and turns of my career. I've latched onto great leaders, and hopefully along the way have helped other leaders become great. And those are the people you want to be with because they're out there. You don't have to settle for where you are just because you're there.
Yeah.
Um, but it's risky, right? You got to make that step out onto the unknown. But once you do, and in all of my career, everyone I've seen, of either we've let someone go because they were in the wrong spot, or we've helped people, peers and friends get to the new thing. Within 3 months, they both of them are happier. Thank you for getting me out of my rut, out of my eddy. Um, I'm in just a better place because I'm in a place where I belong, and it's out
Mhm.
there. If you're not there, you know it. You know it
Mhm.
every time you wake up. Go find it.
Yeah, and I talk to a lot of people that feel like they're stuck, but they're like, but if I just need to stay a little bit longer for this thing, or I can't leave yet because I need this, or I need to wait for this. And so what would you tell to people? What is that evidence or what is that thing that makes you pull the lever?
Yeah. Well, and part of that, your original question was on politics. Like part of that creates politics. It puts you into the field that you're doing things for a different purpose than the company. And you're doing it for yourself or maybe your team or whatever. But you start doing things that I would call politics that aren't what you would want to be doing, isn't the natural instinct. So there's a balance. I'm not Pollyanna enough to say, look, when you hit a bad spot, pull the ripcord and go find the next one. That's probably a little too risky. But set a plan and say, look, I know I don't like it here. I wake up every day and I'm unhappy. I know I want to get to this point in time because there's a stock vesting or there's a promotion. So plan against that and be diligent to do your best till then, but that's your cutoff. Because
Hmm.
I know people who have done that for 25 years and they're still doing it. There's always something else, right? Well, there's another promotion, there's another stock vesting next year. Um, Now you've just given up, and that's sad. And people know that, know that, everybody knows that. And
Yeah.
you'd rather kind of say, look, I have an ambition to get to August 1. Once I get there, I'm going to do these things so my transition out's easier, and go do it. You'll be much
Hmm.
more happy.
Yeah. I one thing I know about you is it feels to me watching you that you make decisions in a really objective way and you're able to kind of in that moment let all the emotions fall away. Is that true?
Well, as humans, right, there's always emotions in there. But I think from a work perspective, I think I've developed over time the ability to be fairly unemotional, like fact based, recognizing there's emotions and there's more to it because we're human. But, like, look, let's just dust it off and here are the facts. And a lot of that is getting the facts and getting people to agree. Well, if I agree with A, B, C, and D, pretty clearly the answer is E. That's unemotional. Is it hard? Sure, when you're dealing with people or changes to other folks. But I do believe in the end, if the facts bear out, that's the best answer for them too, or for yourself. So I've left things that, look, I wish I could have stayed. Like if I had stayed at this company for another 5 years, the other benefits might have been, more substantial. Yeah, but it's 5 years of brain damage, and it's just
Yeah.
not. Life's too short. So I tend
Hmm.
to tell people I'm fairly unemotional. What you see is what you get, and you can't offend me. I think that's the other side of that
Yeah.
triangle is like none of this is personal. Now, if you make it personal, now we're in a different place. That's not, and some people do, and you find ways to deal with that. But business is business, and if I have a bad idea, tell me. I love people that tell me like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in a nice way, because that's how you learn. Um, I'll never get upset if like look we're arguing about or discussing an opinion. But if you're mean, you're just mean, right? So then that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
But I have pretty thick skin, I think now too. But I am an emotional person. Like we all have it in there.
You're
It's
not dead
just
inside. You're not dead inside.
no, I'm not a dead stone inside, but I think in business and in decisions where you're kind of impacting someone else's capital or a team, you kind of got to be fact based
Yeah.
and look at and make the best decision you can. You'll be right 95% of the time. 5% of the time you'll be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So much that you said there too is being able to kind of zoom out and not take it personally. And you said earlier too, just gaining that confidence over time. And so this is like I remember my younger self, and it happens to be my birthday today, but my younger self, when I would hear people say, "Oh, it feels so good to be in my 40s. I just feel like I'm so much more confident and I just feel better in my skin." And I used to think they're just justifying being old. They're just like that's their thing. But as I got older, I felt the same way. And so the question I always ask myself is it a product of more experiences will get you there quicker? Or is it just over time, you just build that confidence, you really understand and refine who you are as a leader along the way? Is there an accelerant that can be added?
Yeah, I think it's both, and I think the more experience you have, obviously, the more you kind of you see patterns, you get
Hmm.
trends, and so nothing shocks you because you've seen it 4 times now. And of course, that person's going to be mad, or there'll be a blow up with the boss about this because it's just you're missing the budget. That's a bad thing, and how do you manage it? But to accelerate it, you have to think about what are the ways that you can learn faster, be more open to learning, get more feedback from mentors and peers and people on the team and colleagues where you're open to saying, look, I don't know every answer. And younger in your career, you know less answers than arguably later in your career, like when you're 40. Happy birthday, by the way. When you turn 40, you're like, look, you have seen more. Now, have you accelerated it? That depends on how eager you are to, internalize what you're seeing, ask for help, and then move on. That would
Hmm.
accelerate your learnings because you're expanding you're getting experience faster in those cases versus just years of time. And so I think that's a way to speed it up.
Yeah. And kind of opting in more, raising your hand and advocating for yourself. Talk to me about those missed opportunities as a leader within large organizations. Where is there a miss when people don't do something that can really accelerate their career? What advice would you give to people that are like coming up in their careers that they should do more of?
Well, and I think it goes to your confidence question. Um, I don't think of it as somebody saying, how can I accelerate my career? Because I think that's a way to think of it. but it's a very myopic way. You're thinking about, how do I get to the next level? I always like to turn it and say, look, if you have great ideas and you have great insights and experiences and you add value to the company, your career is going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're focusing on the company, the growth, I have an opinion, and you're sitting at that meeting and afraid to raise your hand, because that's why someone's paying you, and raise your hand to say, look, I think X and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
Be prepared. And if you do that, you'll build more confidence. You'll then get promoted faster and all that kind of stuff. I think if you come at it the other way and say, how do I get promoted faster? Now you're a bit creating the framework to play politics. You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
move chess pieces around to get yourself into another place. If you do great work, you will go fast.
Mm-hmm.
Simple. That's how the world. I believe that's how the world works.
Yeah. All right. I want to challenge this a little bit because I want to. So, the research in negotiation, when they look at gender, obviously we man, woman. That's the research. Parties,
Yeah.
and they talked about how women expect to be recognized. And so they just think that if they work really hard, they'll be rewarded, where men will tend to ask for or advocate more for themselves. How does that land for you? Do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's a different twist on the prior question. Self advocation all day long. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to um, look. Your manager in a big company has 1,000 people, and they have 15 directs, and this that. As much as they want to build and pay attention and help everyone's career, it's just impossible. So if you're doing your best job, you want to make sure though that you advocate for yourself and say, look, I believe I've done these great things this year. I believe these things really matter to move the needle. And there's probably an argument, and you know the research probably better than I do, or certainly better than I do. Do men do that more, or do women do that more? I just think if you're advocate, everyone should advocate for themselves, because that builds strength, and you're confident in the things that you're doing. You're putting on the table to say, hey, look, just so you're aware, I'm not dissing anyone else, and I just want to make sure you're aware. I think that's extremely fair, and I would agree men do that more, and I don't know why. And I think everyone should do that.
Yeah.
But it starts with, you've done some great work and you have data and results, and you've done the
Yeah, for
right thing
sure.
for the company.
Yeah.
You may just have missed it because you're a little too far away or busy with other stuff. Well, I'm going to remind you twice a year, or whenever we do reviews, or whenever I feel like it's not being seen. That's
Hmm.
totally fair. It's
Yeah.
just facts, right? You're just giving them data to make sure they know.
Yeah. So I talked to a lot of people about it feels like I'm being selfish. It feels like I'm being self-serving. And I'm like, but just because that's your uncomfort in you, that's not how it's heard.
Right.
So tell me, when people come and go, listen, Matt, I knocked it out of the park in that last project. I want you to know. And so I'm going to come back to you in 3 months and say, listen, I want this promotion. I want this. Like, how does that sound to you?
Those are the people I love. See, I like to play offense, and I'm more of in my brain, I'm not going to be the big idea person. I'm going to be we're going to enable great people to do great things. So
Mm-hmm.
I've constantly pushed people to find that next thing. What I think is an approach to that, then you can talk tactics, go to your boss and say, look, what does it take to get to that level, to be
Yeah.
vice president or senior vice president? Like, what is it? And if it's time served, you're in the wrong company, right? There are companies that way. Find out what it takes, then say, I want to work with you to achieve it because I think
Yeah.
I'll be great. And I will do everything in my power to get you there. But those discussions are honest in two-way, because you may come to me and say, I've done the greatest things in the world and I want to be promoted. And I'll say, okay, well, let's look at that. Was this the greatest thing? Yeah, I
Mm.
think it was average. I really like you, and I know it's your birthday, but and
Right.
and you have to be open to that discussion to say, okay, well, why was that average? What did I miss? But that's where the trust and transparency comes in. You want an environment like that with your boss, and you want to create that with your team. And then look, when you hit the point, it doesn't have to be 3 months. Maybe it's a month from now. Like you're ready now. Let's
Yeah.
do it. There's no time element, but you have to advocate, and I love it. Just depends on your relationship with your boss, and some bosses aren't very good at that. That's just hard work for them, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. It means you have a bad boss.
Yeah. Yeah, I love to think about it from their voice in your head, and it will sound just normal to them. It doesn't sound like you're being this boastful, self-serving, when you really understand. But you gave some really great techniques and things that you can partner with your boss around to say, this is where I'm going. How do I get there? Now that I've gotten there,
Yeah,
what does this look like?
yeah.
Um, and that makes me think about feedback because you seem like a very straight shooter. And feedback is just one of those things I often get calls about. Can you help my team be able to receive feedback? And I'm like, well, it starts with you. And and the research shows that the higher you go up, the less feedback you receive, and self-awareness actually goes down. So how do you keep yourself really open to hearing really objective, very important feedback without making sure that you're turning, shutting people down?
Well, it goes to the advocacy a bit. As you move up the stack, and if you're saying the data says this, I would agree. As I moved up the stack, I got less and less reviews and less feedback. So you really have to go seek it out. So I don't care what level you are, you got to go to your peers, to your team, and to your bosses and say, I want to know. And if you tell me everything's fine, I'm going to say you're just lazy. Like everything is just fine. I'd rather want to understand what I can do better. I'm very confident what I'm doing. I think I'm doing right, or you would have bapped me in the head. What can I do better, more of, different, And so I think you have to seek it out. And then as a leader, I think you have to seek it out and make sure your leaders are providing it, seeking it, and engaged. Feedback's tricky, right? It's a risk of rejection. It's
Yeah.
to your prior example, hey, Matt, I'm doing great. And I think in 3 months I should be here, to have Matt say, or whoever, yeah, you're really not that great.
Yeah.
um, that's a risk, right? But wouldn't you rather know than 3 months from now you don't get promoted, and
Yeah.
3 months from then you don't get promoted? That boss is afraid to be honest with you, and that's a shame.
Yeah.
But you should know, and you should push that.
Yeah. New leaders always come to me and say, hey, can you give me the right leadership course I need to take? Or what do I need to do? I'm not ready to be a leader. And it really strikes me when I think about you. When I first learned about you before we met, you took over the part of Comcast that I had just left. And I remember hearing from people, we do things so differently. And the town halls are now X, Y, and Z so different. We even have alcohol now. And so, like, it really struck me, and that seems to be a similar theme, that your way is your way. You lead in a very unique way. So, what is that? And how did you get there to feel just like, I'm going to do it my way, and I'm not going to worry if I'm doing it the right way?
Well, I will do it my way because that's who I am, right? So I can't create another way. And to like read it in a book, I think that's hard. There's techniques and tactics. I think the books can help you. But if you're authentic, like this is like if you are who you are, and this is how I lead. I tell you everything that I can possibly tell you without being, certainly there's a line in there. Um, you're a part of this company as much as I'm a part of this company. So why am I treated any different than you? We should all share our thoughts. We should all talk about how we make the company better. Um, like if you have the mentality of like you're in the same boat with everyone else, then I think these things are more natural. And I think having beer at a an all hands, or we did an all hands as a Letterman show. Like life can be fun too
Yeah,
within bounds.
love that.
Um, life can be, and work is a big part of your life, so you have to and want to enjoy it. My belief is if people enjoy it, they're going to do 10 times more than they would if they hate it. And so I think it's really just being authentic and open, and not play politics, and not like make the norm of the group not political. Not that people won't be. Again, if we had 1,500 people on our team, not everyone's going to think that way, and but then you're pretty soon going to be like, oh yeah, that's what we're not. Like it'll stand out, and they'll self-select out. That
Yeah.
being said, if my boss says, look, I don't believe in the way you're doing it, my answer is then you shouldn't have hired me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and when bosses have changed at Comcast, my boss changed to a new boss, and we could not have been more different culturally. And I said after about a couple months, like this, no, this just isn't going to work. No harm, no foul. You're not right. I'm not right. But this isn't. We're not aligned. I can't be me, and I can't. Then I can't be here. And
Yeah.
so that's just life.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. You've said so many things that will be really insightful for people. As you know, I love to talk specifically, and we've talked about advocating for yourself, which is negotiation is a tool to do that instead of a weapon. And so I want to ask you about leverage,
Mhm.
because I think leverage is an interesting concept that can be applied to every day, everywhere. And as leaders, I think of it as a power skill. And so I wanted to get your take on leaders and leverage.
Well, leverage is just a fact, right? So if you're the senior vice president, you have inherent leverage over the manager, right? Just because you're more experienced, you're viewed at in a different way. So I think good leaders figure out how that not to use it that way, because
Mm-hmm.
that's like, of course, you can. I think where leverage comes from is knowledge, and leverage comes from preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you create the case with facts and data, like you said before, 3 months I want to be promoted, that's very unemotional and very hard to dispute unless you really want to just be a dispute and be an ass, right? So
Yeah.
I think leverage there's inherent that just exists. So the SVP will have more. Brian Roberts, as CEO, will have more leverage over things than anyone in the company. But that doesn't mean you can't negotiate with him to a better outcome
Mm-hmm.
because you bring facts, you bring data, you bring compassion, you bring listening, and you get to the right place. And so those that use their power, their institutional or organizational power as leverage, probably aren't people you want to spend a lot of time around with over time, because
Mm-hmm.
that's lazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the SVP, but we're not solving the problem. We're not
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what's right. That's just lazy, but it exists. So you have to recognize those power traits and just be better informed and better locked down. And that's your strength. Data and knowledge is your strength.
Yeah. Even about others. And what you're making me think about thinking about the interests of in your staff meeting. What are the interests of the people at the table before you walk in? Like you said, preparation, like being thoughtful and mindful about how you engage and what's going to really inspire them to be their best is considering those places of leverage where that you can pull.
Absolutely. And knowing the 5, 10 people at your table and getting to know them and
Hmm.
spending time and knowing where they grew up and knowing what makes them tick and what do they
Yeah.
want in 5 years, you have to ask. Like
Yeah.
they're not going to offer that up. You have to kind of go to make a great team. You got to figure that out. And
Hmm.
then sometimes you figure it out and you're like, oh, we are not on the same page.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying my page is right and yours is wrong or vice versa, but something here is not going to work, or we have to A, figure out how to solve it, or B, we have to solve it by not being in the same team.
Yeah.
Um, and that's that. The thing with that is you got to get there quicker. I think most people are afraid to have those discussions and dig deep into understanding their motivations of the team. The longer that takes, the more BS that happens. And you'd rather figure it out quicker
Hmm.
to see if you have alignment. Now, alignment means I have like, here's where I think we're going. Are we aligned? Like, so you have to kind of be prepared on what it is you're asking them. Where are we going? As a leader, people look to you. Well, where are we going? And
Hmm.
if you don't know or it's not clear, it's really hard to figure out, are you aligned? Because you don't even
Yeah.
know where the heck you're going.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and so much of that is not mysterious. It's just being a good listener.
Yes, the lost art of listening.
Totally. Yeah, my coach said to me years and years ago, if you want to know the wisest person in the room, it's a person that is not saying but just observing. And I thought, practice wisdom. That is
Yes,
so good.
yes.
Not trying to
Oh, and
please
even as
anyone.
a tactic, and I don't like to say tactics because it sounds manipulative, but I think it more of an observation. When you meet people for the first time or you take someone to lunch to learn about them, listen, like ask them questions. Don't, they're not there to hear your story. They can ask you about your story. That's fine. But you're really there to find out about them. They will leave that lunch like, I really enjoyed that. And you
Yes.
may not have said a damn word, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But you learned a lot, and that was again what you were. That was the goal.
What it is. Yeah. Because that those questions just spark that person's mind to be thoughtful, and you're showing them that you're interested. It's like the best hack. It's the best relationship hack that people don't use. Is
Yeah,
just ask, just keep one question after the other, and they'll leave. You're right. They'll leave going, they are the best person I've ever met. What can I do for them?
and they
And
may
that's
not have
all.
said a word at lunch. You know what I mean? But you'd be
Totally.
surprised, I think, with talk to people on your team, like, what do you want in 3 years? Just like open
Yeah.
ended, fun questions. You'd be surprised that some of them don't want your job. Some of them don't want to do that. They're really happy with X or Y. And then you say, well, how do we get you there? How do we keep you there? How do we, but you never would have known that, right? And
Yeah.
so you're assuming things that are creating problems that if you just asked might not have been a problem at all or easily solved in another way. But you have to take the time to listen.
Oh, so good. What a great way to end. This has been such a great discussion. I really appreciate your perspective and your wisdom that you brought today. Thanks so much,
Well,
Matt.
I like to say you get what you pay for. So you got all that wisdom for nothing,
That's
and
fair.
you get a happy birthday on your birthday. So
Thank you. And you know what? I have to do this because shameless plug is, but I'd love for people to write a review of this podcast because then that helps people find it. So they don't have to pay for it, but it would be really helpful. So for in honor of my birthday, since I let everybody know, if they could do that, that'd be great. So can you put that plug in too, Matt? We didn't practice this, but can you do that too?
absolutely, I will plug that. And on your special day, of course, we're going to go plug this podcast to get people to come watch.
Okay, thank you for that. Well done. Well done. Not even rehearsed. So, thank you so much, Matt. If you want to connect with Matt, you can find him on LinkedIn. He's always doing new and really this year he's going to be on a verge of something big that he hasn't announced yet. So, keep watching where he goes next. So, thank you, Matt. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.